All right, 2016 Jeep Grand Cherokee situation with the driver's side CV axle. The boot has torn. There's heavy grease all over everything here on the suspension. Safety glasses, rust penetrant. Can never start too early on that. Not too much rust on the upper ball joint, but why not? Tie rod end, lower ball joint. Turn the wheel all the way to the right so we can easily access the caliper bracket. They appear to have some caps covering the bolts, and the caps are covered in grease. There's one of the caps. That's got an interesting caliper bolt. Same with the top. And obviously, kind of a dangerous situation if you got any grease on your brake pad, so we're addressing this immediately here. Just notice this, rotating the tires, stuff you want to look out for when you're rotating your tires. $10 millimeters it was. All right, now that I have better visibility, I am going to leave the caliper mounted to the caliper bracket, but later on I will be removing it to inspect the brake pads, and that does take an 11 millimeter hex bit that fits into those openings on the bolt stud underneath those caps I removed. But for now I'm going to remove the caliper bracket off the knuckle and just remove the whole caliper assembly all as one, and that does take a E20 kind of inverted Torx head, and that fits on the two caliper bolts. Some sort of O-ring that needs to be removed. I think that just stabilizes the rotor. I got lucky, it didn't spin. All right, 24 millimeters was the lower ball joint, upper 21 millimeters. Need to get a little angle on it. And we're gonna be cautious so this thing doesn't go flying. think we're going to leave that attached until we loosen this stabilizer link. 21 millimeters as well. Keep that together for now. .32 is a little loose. 31 would be better. I have a 30 and that's too small. This is all I got. See if it'll come. Oh boy. All right, worth mentioning, this is the weird socket set that I was using. They're impact resistant. They have the hex keys and Torx bits on there. I went over to AutoZone and rented this fork to remove the CV axle. It's part number 57305. I'm going to see if that works. That's what it looks like. The actual CV axle that I'm replacing, I grabbed that at Napa. They had it on hand. Very limited amount of room in here to get into popping off this CV axle. I think I'm going to approach with this fork at the 7 o'clock position, right through this little gap here. Ooh, that's not what I want to do there. Well, I'm really not happy how much I chewed that up. But there's only one direction this has room to fit, and that's at this 7 o'clock position. I had to kind of turn the CV shaft until I can find an area where this finally decided to wedge in there. We'll have to pause it right where I ended up at, but that was a good position. And I've learned my lesson in the past. I've done this on other vehicles and there was no leak, but then after removing the CV shaft and inserting a new one, putting it all back together, I had a very slight drip coming out, and I had to start all over and come back and pop this seal out. So I'm going to do that now and do some preventative work here. Yeah, I definitely fought with that for about 5 minutes. This fork is tapered on one side only. You want to get that in so you have some leverage on it, but I'm just not happy how much the transmission case got chewed up with this. This is just a bit thick at the tip. Previously, I've used a different tool. It was made by CTA Tools, and it was part number 1040, and I was looking for it, but AutoZone doesn't rent it anymore, and it would take too many days to get here. But it was similar to something like this, very thin, and then wedges wider, but you know, much wider for a CV axle. So I wish I had that. So I'm going to grab a seal prior tool here and replace that seal as well. All right, here's the new axle seal. And there is a little spring in here. And there's a rumor that if you pack this with grease, as you inset this into the transmission, especially if you tend to tap this in at a different angles, it has a tendency to want to pop out. So if you pack it with grease, it'll help prevent that from popping out. In a perfect world, putting something cylinder in shape and tapping that in to give it even pressure would be best. Something like that. So I was actually able to push mine in by hand. It's kind of different. How frustrating. Don't want to rip the new boot. Wow. That was rough. Gotta do what you gotta do. Supposedly, the opening of this clip should be on the top. It's supposed to be a helpful tip. I don't know if you can see how cockeyed that boot is. I'm going to have to do something to try to tap that in a little better. So from me forcing this boot through the gap of this upper strut really pushed this holding clip this way, and I'm hoping to be able to tap off just the clip to fix it without tearing the boot. And that's risky business. Maybe if I twist this. Oh, man. Man, this is sketchy. That slid back on. So actually, I think that was a bad idea to try to push on the clip. I came down into the boot a little bit, and it feels like there's some kind of rubber donut inside the boot that I could grab my thumbs on and push, and I was able to kind of push up and over the metal of the axle shaft here. And I think as we push pressure into the joint itself, you know, the wheel is gonna, this boot is gonna be pushed that direction. As we start spinning, hopefully it slips itself on even more securely, as this clamp here at the other end of the boot hasn't been altered and it's real tight. So that's the plan. Looks like the new CV shaft came with a new axle nut. That's good. So lower ball joint and the axle spindle kind of at the same time. Oh well, coming up short a bit. All right, going to try that again. I'm just going to temporarily put on the nut for the lower ball joint, because it looks like we need to fight this guy down. Oh wow, I don't know how I'm going to do that. Alright, gotta temporarily stabilize it as well. Alright, didn't really think that out, so I got the stabilizer temporarily screwed down. I think I'm just going to grab a pry bar off one of these coils up here. Got some red Loctite. It helped if I had the right size socket on it. See if I can secure that up a little better. Alright, red thread sealer on the tie rod ball joint. And I've been pretty lucky so far. Normally, these guys just want to spin. Definitely want to dry off any grease that could be on the threads for the spindle itself. Often these axle nuts are sealed, but not this one. Definitely 32 millimeters this time. Well, enough air would help. I was just thinking, anytime you grab a hammer, that should be a red flag to stop what you're doing. Pretty upset with myself how chewed up this got, but live and learn, I guess. I'm going to clean up this rust, put the rotor on, the O-ring, the caliper, call it a day. All right, so I'm going to try to compress the pistons without damaging my brake pad by putting the front side of the other brake pad right up against it and using this tool here just to give me a little bit of room to easily slide the caliper over the rotor, and just to make this symmetrical. Drop down a bit here. And that's already given me enough space. Oh yeah. So the brake pad definitely goes on easier without that clip on there. But will the clip go back on easy? I'm going to start by getting this little ear of the clip in the top hole. So now we got room. Here's those ridiculous caliper bracket bolts. All right, we don't want to forget the caps for the caliper bolts. An important step before we put the wheel on is to pop out that center cap, because once we get the wheel on and lower the vehicle down, we do need to torque the axle nut down to spec. Probably noticed I didn't do that on all the ball joints, as I didn't have that information available. And what I did is I tightened them down pretty snug, if anything too snug, because this project was kind of a rush, and that's not normally how I roll, but they're not going anywhere. And I do anticipate being back working with the front suspension, taking a look at the brakes and everything real soon here. All right, now that the vehicle is lowered onto the ground and supported by its own weight, we're going to torque to 229 foot-pounds on the axle nut, which looks like I was already there, so I probably over-torqued it a touch. Pop the decorative cap back on, and that's going to do it. So this is Wise Guy. I hope this helped. Thanks for watching.